Here's 5 works that broke the established graphic design rules of the time, each one a lesson in prioritising the communication of your idea above blanket rules. Because whilst I'm a strong advocate of adhering to design principles, I'm not a fundamentalist. Creativity demands that we deviate from what's expected, even if that means transgressing established doctrine. The first unwritten rule is that logo imagery must represent the brand's activity. In 1955, this was the logo for Chase and Manhattan Bank following their merger. We have a map of the United States to represent where they're based, the name of the company. We've got a globe to represent that they work internationally. And if that's not clear enough, we have the words worldwide banking just to make it super obvious. But Chimaev and Geismar, the design agency who engaged with the bank in 1961, realized that logos don't need to communicate, they simply need to identify. So they proposed replacing this communicative emblem with this radically simple abstract symbol. Now, at the time, this was quite a leap. Right now it may seem obvious, corporate logos have become everywhere, but it's because of moves like this. And the bank didn't like it. I believe the chairman even said, "I hate it," when he was first shown it. But they realized that because Chase and Manhattan had now become the second largest bank in America, they were able to define what a bank should look like. They didn't need to rely on looking at their category and their competitors. They were either using these communicative imagery, or a lot of them were using illustrations of their headquarters. But all these skyscrapers started to look the same. But they realized an abstract symbol could be infused with its own meaning. And over time, this became one of the most recognizable icons in the United States. Over 60 years later, it's still in use today. And it's that leap of the imagination, it's that vision, and it's being able to convince the right client that allows an agency like that to charge such high fees for design. It's not drawing this symbol. It's a simple thing. Probably anybody watching this video would be able to create a clean vector drawing of this very simple symbol. But that's not where the value lies. The value lies in the creativity, in the vision, and the persuasion. And even though that wasn't what was done within that category, they saw that it could work. The second unwritten rule is that magazines need a grid. Here is some work on Blah 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 magazine by the British art director Chris Ashworth, and then later his work on Raygun magazine, which he took over as the art director from the legendary David Carson, who was a real pioneer of postmodernist graphic design and the whole grunge kind of look. And Chris says about this work, I saw in an interview, quote, "Every time I did an issue, I would start again. I didn't have any grids or templates or anything," end quote. I'm thinking, yeah, Chris, we can tell you're not using a grid there. So there just seems to be a complete disregard for the conventions. If you were to pick up like a fashion magazine at the time, what it would have looked like. And this is just kind of thrown out the window. How do you organize so much information throughout a magazine without a grid? But I think the important thing when it comes to breaking the rules is sometimes you might want to break one rule. In this case, grids and alignment seem to have sort of been thrown out, but other design principles are still in play. So we're still relying in these layouts on things like focal point, white space, contrast, and they allow the designs to work. And obviously it was the right kind of client. It was a more avant-garde kind of publication. So with a magazine, you could get away with it. But it shows really brilliant creativity. And I would just caution you, if you want to take on this kind of approach, you absolutely can, and you can throw out some of these rules. However, first of all, you better have impeccable taste. So you can still recognize when something has the right visual appeal and it's producing the right feel, and it doesn't just look like a mess, but it's done with intention. And secondly, you have to have an artistic vision in mind. Chris here clearly knew what he wanted the final product to kind of look and feel like. There was a guiding aesthetic behind it. It was kind of influenced by Swiss modernism, but then it was this grungy and textures and then deconstructed kind of layouts, but there's still some of the building blocks of modernism are still within it. So it's that combination that forms a style. So if you have that clear vision and you're able to still allow other design principles in play. Just by changing one can really make it feel something that's fresh. The third unwritten rule is that word marks must be legible. Now, surely this is obvious. You need to be able to read the words of a logo so it's easy to read and it's instantly recognizable, and you want that to be clear. But with the identity, the word mark for Tate, which was last redrawn in 2016 by North, it's not super legible straight away. And for those who don't know, Tate is a series, there's 4 art galleries within the United Kingdom, and they're a big brand within the art world, a big space here in Europe. And the legibility is not super clear here compared to, I don't know, something like Sony, where straight away you see the contrast, you see the boldness and the clarity of those letters, and it's easy to read. But it works for a few reasons. One is it kind of invites you in to look at it, to consider it. That's exactly what artwork does within the gallery, good art. So it draws you in that same way. The next thing is that it demonstrates a little bit of craft in the way it's put together. Again, appropriate for an art gallery. And what they do is, throughout the rest of their identity, they tend to lean more on the typography. They have their own font, their own typeface that's been designed, and they use this very consistently, often in uppercase, and this becomes a house style for them, so they don't need to rely just on the word mark. And then they're able to use the word mark or the style of it and the dot pattern and different crops of it as graphic elements throughout their identity to allow the whole thing to work. So sometimes legibility, being able to read something, isn't the most important thing. The fourth unwritten rule is that logos must be displayed consistently. From 1998 until the present, Google have created over 5,000 doodles. Now, this is one of the most visited websites on the internet, and you would think that when you go there, we need to see the logo. This is what we're told over and again. It reinforces trust when we see a logo that we recognize, that we know we're in the right place. You might think it's obvious, like I can see google.com there in the address bar, but remember, like, your grandma is going to visit Google, on a regular basis, and people need that comfort of knowing where they are. But by keeping the other elements the same, the search field is still in the same place, they're able, by it being the same size and in the sort of similar position, to let you know that you're still at Google, but bringing some creativity and some expression. And if this was a lesser known site, this would be a rule that they wouldn't be able to change. They wouldn't be able to hide their logo or change their logo in the way that Google can. But because it's so well known, and because they keep the other elements all the same and all fixed, they're able to change that doodle. And now it's gone to the point where oftentimes it's not even recognized as reading Google like a lot of the early doodles were, but it's very abstract, or it's become like interactive games that you can engage with. And it's actually become a canvas for them, so they can express something about their values and things that they're interested in, or things they want to promote or talk about, being that they have such visibility and such an important role in culture. So if you achieve that level of status, then you can start being able to break some of rules like displaying your logo consistently. The fifth unwritten rule, the final one, is that logos must be grammatically correct. Now, today, emojis have entered our vocabulary. They're now part of our language, and we see all kinds of weird things in logos as well, like using like other symbols or other sort of glyphs, like we might use dashes, less than symbols, and bring these kind of things in. But back in the 1970s, that was a very strange thing to do when Milton Glaser proposed this logo. But the I Love New York emblem has become an icon of New York City. It's loved by New Yorkers and known by tourists all over the world. It's become one of the most ubiquitous pieces of merchandise ever created over the last 40 some years. And at the time, this was very strange to use this symbol, to use a heart. how are we supposed to read this, as heart, or without the grammar, without it being spelled out correctly. This was a leap of the imagination at the time. But that little bit of creativity can then create something that's iconic, and I believed paved the way for us to use things like emojis and go back to this pictorial language from the days of Egyptian hieroglyphics, then into letter forms, and now we seem to be going back to be using pictures more and more, with the use of emojis, with the use of icons on websites, the use of emblems and corporate logos as well. These sort of symbolic imagery has become a very, very important part of communication in our culture today. My philosophy is to learn the rules and then break them. Principles help us achieve consistently effective solutions, but in a world that's focused on optimization, we need the spark of creativity to produce uncommon results. If you want to learn a proven process for creating brand identities that allows room for creativity, have a look at our Brand Design Mastery program. Until next time, happy designing.